the NBA owners unanimously passed a motion to create the long-awaited, the long-rumored play-in tournament. And even though Mark Cuban, the Mavericks owner, voted for it, he did have some thoughts, as he is wont to do. Joining me now, Nick Angstadt from Locked On Mavs. And Nick, let's start there. What did you think of Cuban's criticism of the play-in tournament, saying he's worried about the schedule, it's going to be too compressed?
When you hear from Mark Cuban, he's very specific in when he decides to come out and say things, even though sometimes it comes, random stuff. Russell Westbrook's not a superstar, that kind of thing. There's always some kind of reason behind it. But in this one, it's very strange timing because the Mavericks are in 7th in the West right now in the NBA. And so they're the ones that would be in the play-in tournament. And so he kind of came out against the play-in tournament and said it was a mistake and all that. But I think even though it sounds like Cuban is speaking out of both sides of his mouth, because like you said, it was a unanimous decision by the Board of Governors to make this decision to do the play-in, to have the compressed schedule, to get this season underway, that the ramifications and what the NBA was going to go through, what these players were going to go through, I don't know if they thought it all the way through and saw, okay, this is exactly what we're going through. Last season, teams on average played 3.4 games per week. And then this season, it's 3.7 games per week. So it's like just a little bit more. It's a pretty big difference when you're talking about the number of, back-to-backs and all this. Over the last, 10 years or so, the NBA has done so much to relieve the back-to-backs and the stress and the pressure. And so now to go against that with this season, to try and just cram it all in, there was reasons for it. And the reasons I think are very well known. I'm doing the Johnny Manziel money sign for everybody on the podcast.
Yeah, and look, none of these decisions are ever made without money in mind, whether it's the primary factor or not. But your point about the Mavs being 7th in the West, the primary objective, ostensibly, the primary objective is to give more teams opportunities to make the postseason, which in turn, again, theoretically, makes them disincentivized to tank. All right, all the caveats about this also being a lot about the money aside, how much do you think it actually changes the calculus here for teams who are sort of on the precipice of, the play-in tournament? If they're 9th, 10th, are teams actually going to use this as an incentive to say, let's go try and make the playoffs?
I think you're already seeing it, and I think you're seeing teams like the Chicago Bulls make the biggest trade of the trade deadline and getting Nikola Vucevic. I mean, you're starting to see some of these teams that are just not bowing out, right? The Golden State Warriors are a team, they should just pack it up and put, like Steph Curry and Draymond Green on ice for the rest of the season. But they're incentivized. Yeah, then they're incentivized to go out there and play. The Pelicans, kind of the same thing. The Toronto Raptors, they still kind of have something to play for. The Knicks are, still in the mix. And teams like that. And so we're starting to see it. It stinks for the teams that are in 7 and 8, right? That they do all this. They get the lead in the regular season, and then they could lose one game and be out that playoff money, be out that playoff experience for all those, players and everything. But to go back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, one of the reasons why Cuban came out and said this today, right, is because after the Sixers game, Luka Doncic came out and said, I don't understand the idea of a play-in. You get 72 games to get into the playoffs, then maybe you lose 2 in a row and you're out of the playoffs, so I don't see the point of that. And I think Cuban was taking a little pressure off of Luka in this because, like we said earlier, the Mavs are in that 7th spot. Luka's coming out and saying, I don't like this play-in tournament. I don't understand it. And I think Cuban was like, hey, look over here. I'm gonna now make this big statement. Like, we made a horrendous, enormous mistake. That's Cuban's sort of distraction.
There is also a possibility that in an effort to create some excitement, which this is certainly going to do, create some more revenue, which is certainly going to do, it is actually going to be hurtful to competitive balance in the way that you're describing. And we saw it in the bubble last year. The Memphis Grizzlies looked like if we were going to have a regular season, they were sort of going to coast to the playoffs. Instead, they had to fight tooth and nail just to be in the play-in tournament. And you're not rewarding these teams who are getting there. On the flip side, though, does anyone past the top 3 seeds in the East really deserve to have their playoff spot locked in? No, you should probably have to play for it. So it does create those opportunities as well. And of course, you mentioned the Knicks, and it made me think of this. they want to keep these big markets in, the Bulls. They want to make sure that those teams are still fighting for something at the end of the year. So they're getting, once again, Johnny Manziel, they're getting those dollars for the TV money.
100%. And we're starting to see those teams. And as a fan, as a media member, like as somebody that covers the league, I love the play-in. I think it's so great. Not even if I step away even from my Mavericks role, like as somebody that covers the Mavericks, I'm not super into it right now because they could lose they could lose 2 games and be out of it. But as a fan, I'm going to love it, right? Like imagine if we get that Lakers-Warriors play-in game where it's Steph Curry versus LeBron, or even Luka versus Steph Curry, right? That one game to just put on display. And it's incentivizing these teams that are kind of stuck in the middle to not pick tanking right away, which was just happening so often. And so I think it is sort of doing what the Board of Governors wanted it to do. It's giving that incentive, but now in this shortened schedule and all that, it's just it's a lot because teams are playing for more. The Mavericks especially are playing this 8-man rotation because they need to stay in this spot, stay in the playoff race, and they're playing a constricted schedule. And so it's even harder this season than it would have been in a normal season when they made this rule change.